Hello, my name is Julianne Puente, and I'm the Deputy Head of School and Dean of Students at King's Academy. These are two roles I've held for the last 11 years, and in a few weeks my time at King's will come to an end. In thinking about my tenure here, it was bookended by two major crises. The first one is the death of one of our seniors, Ahmed Tarone, in April of 2010. And now, as my last months draw to a close, COVID-19, which has, for all intents and purposes, shut down campus. Over the next few minutes, I'll talk about how we approach the crisis of COVID-19 at King's Academy. I do not profess to be an expert on this, but I have been fortunate to meet and speak and learn from many experts over the course of my time at King's. Ahmed's death, while an extremely painful experience, was a singular event. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the recovery process was different for different people. It presented a host of different challenges than what COVID-19 presents us as a community. We don't know if we're in the beginning, the middle, or the end. And that's what makes this particular crisis so incredibly challenging. Both crises, while extremely different, are both crucial in my development as a leader. Let's begin talking about what COVID-19 has meant to King's Academy and how we've approached this crisis on campus.
When we realized COVID-19 would be a major crisis we would need to manage on campus, we began planning and preparing as soon as we possibly could. The sooner you can put in written plans, prepare, drill, do tabletop discussions, the better you'll be able to lead, manage, and then eventually recover in a crisis management situation. But before we do that, let's take a look at the spread of COVID around the world and within Jordan in particular. This first map is taken from Johns Hopkins University, and it starts from the earliest cases to the present. As you can see, it spread through China, Europe, into the United States, and into South America. Let's take a look at Jordan in particular within that global context. On the left is the world view, on the right is a zoom in on Jordan. As you can see, Jordan did not have any cases until March 2nd of 2020. Even till today, the total number of cases in Jordan is 407. Here are two charts that will give you some more context of the spread of COVID-19 within Jordan. The one on the left shows the number of active cases versus recovery. Till today, Jordan has had 7 deaths and about 407 cases. This chart on the right is perhaps even more impressive. The brown line shows the total number of confirmed cases within the kingdom. The turquoise line shows the number of active cases. As you can see, that continues to go down. The recovered cases continue to increase. But Jordan didn't just flatten its curve. It never allowed it to get any kind of arc. And so as you can see, it's relatively flat from the beginning, from the first cases until today. And that was because of the extraordinary measures the government took in enacting martial law and having strong curfews. This next slide puts Jordan in even greater context. On the left, you have a linear graph. On the right, I did it on a log base 10, same chart, of confirmed cases in China, Italy, the United States, Greece, the UAE, and Jordan over the same amount of time. I chose the UAE and Greece in comparison to Jordan because they have roughly the same population of around 10 million. You can see here, the UAE had close to 5,800 cases, Greece 2,200 cases, but Jordan has maintained very few confirmed cases, although they have done extensive testing at only 407. Absolutely amazing work by the government. When managing a crisis, you have to think about who are the stakeholders? Who are you serving? What interests do they have? So clearly at a school, you have parents, students, faculty, employees, and alumni. But in addition to these 5 groups, we also take a look at our role in the kingdom, working with other schools. How do we work within other boarding schools or other independent schools? And this helps shape our thinking. When looking at institutions and how they manage crisis, you have to go beyond, are they simply employers, but who are they serving and how do they do it? All residential schools in this context are really unique, and King's Academy in particular is especially unique. This is Maslow's hierarchy, which shows the basic needs of humans. So for us as an institution, we do provide for the physiological needs and safety needs. We work as an academic institution at love and belonging, working to increase esteem and self-actualization of all of our community members. But when managing this crisis, we really began with assessing how can we best meet the bottom two needs. King's was slightly ahead of the curve, not just in terms of Jordan, but in relation to other independent and residential schools. In January, well before the first case came to Jordan, because we have so many Chinese students on our campus, we made the decision early on to leave our campus open during spring break. One of the things we very much wanted to do was provide as much choice to our families as we possibly could. During this time, we really worked hard to educate our community about COVID-19, and we addressed directly issues of xenophobia and racism on campus. In February, again, we began looking at the long view, looking at summer contingency plans. How would we best serve our students if they were unable to return home? And then by chance, I happened to attend this year the National Association of Independent Schools Conference in Philadelphia. And at that time, I really sensed the growing concern of all independent schools, particularly in the US, on how they would go about handling this crisis. In early March, Jordan saw its first case. On March 2nd, we devised our online learning plan and continued school as normal. It is important to note that all sectors of the kingdom operated as they normally would, and they would do so for another 2 to 3 weeks. On March 4th, we began encouraging faculty and students, both day and boarding students, to remain in Jordan over spring break. And then on March 12th was our very last day of classes before spring break. Classes remained open. We had well over 120 students who had decided to stay here, and almost all of our faculty remained on campus. We were slightly ahead of the curve. As the landscape in Jordan began to change regarding COVID-19, we again returned to the question, who are the stakeholders and how would they be impacted by the decisions we would make as an institution? It's not enough just to look at these 5 different groups, because within these groups, there are many, many different stakeholders. For example, with parents, are you an international parent? Are you a parent of a senior or of a week boarder? How are middle school parents different from day parents? Our faculty, you residential faculty or expat, you're Jordanian or day faculty. King's Academy is extremely self-sufficient. We have many, many different departments and we are a large employer. How would they be impacted if we locked down campus? Our alumni began contacting us. What about their reunions and our recent alumni? Graduation is such an important event for them to reconnect with King's Academy. And of course, our students, not just our 7th graders and 12th graders, but who's a full boarder and international, who would be able to go home, who could not? What about our newly admitted students? All of these came into play. And it was complicated. Here's a sense of the timeline from March 2nd to March 8th. Number of cases in Jordan, 1. It was just 1 case for about 2 weeks. At King's, when that first case happened, we decided on our schedule. We began Zoom trials and began planning. We began meeting as a faculty, but we held school as we normally would. In fact, we even had our big MUN conference that particular weekend, and although several schools pulled out, it was still a highly, highly successful event. But this is the week or the time period that would change greatly, from March 9th to March 18th. On March 9th to 12th, number of cases in Jordan stayed relatively flat. On March 15th, though, these days, you began to see an escalation in cases. This incidentally would be the greatest number of cases that you would see in Jordan in terms of the daily confirmed cases. The actions of the kingdom were simple. In the very beginning, it was about isolation. But on March 12th, and I remember it vividly, they announced that schools would close. We were here, we were in class, we had assembly, and we were actually able to be together as a community. And if I had to have just one last day and what it would look like the kind of day that we had on March 12th. It was quite special. On March 13th, we were on spring break. The kingdom announced that they would close mosques. And then on March 15th, they would in fact close schools and indicated additional potential measures would be announced. On the 17th, in the evening, they closed the airport, and on the 18th forward, they enforced a very strict curfew. Here's what it looked like for us. For the majority of time, we were just in normal school. Spring break happened, and then we sensed that things were beginning to change in the kingdom. On that Friday, we decided to stop all campus trips. We announced ahead of time that we would be locking down the campus on that Tuesday, and then we were able to pack items within dorm rooms and get them down to the gate so that our day students and week boarders would be able to function as well as they possibly could when we went to online classes. On the 18th of March, we officially locked our campus down, and it remains so until today. So at this point, we moved from planning and preparing to leading, and that is a different kind of crisis management mindset. As I said, on March 13th, we suspended all off-campus travel. We announced the lockdown before the country began to lock down. We had to be able to function. We would have over 178 people on campus. How would we cook? Who would take care of the buildings? How about our campus and the stewardship for that? Amazingly enough, 27 staff members left their families and moved permanently into campus into some empty dorm rooms. We began helping international families with travel arrangements and working with embassies and coordinating all of that kind of travel. At that point, Jordan announces its curfew and that the airport would close. We facilitated the collection of the academic necessities for students, and we closed the gate and began to build a perimeter around the campus. Now, this is something that would come under fire, but I would say on March 12th, which is important to note, which is our last day before spring break, we estimate that over 1,600 people crossed through the gate. To therefore start with social distancing just a few days later made very little sense to us. That we would treat our campus as a home, allow people to interact freely, but build a strict perimeter around that campus. And that's how we've been able to manage. Jordan enacted martial law, which greatly restricted the movement.
This is what martial law looks like. I think when we hear martial law, it conjures up all kinds of wartime imagery. But as you can see around me, my version of martial law has been extremely tranquil and peaceful, which is very indicative to what my 11 years of Jordan have been. When we decided to lock down our campus, we had to begin to make some tough decisions. What would happen if somebody got sick? What happens if somebody needed emergency medical care we couldn't provide here as well? What happens if somebody simply wanted to leave? These are all big policy questions that we began to actively engage with. But I will tell you one thing for sure, people had lots and lots of questions.
There were so many questions, it was actually overwhelming. On March 24th, when we sent out surveys to our faculty, students, and parents, we were asked over 456 questions across 30 topics. But when you're leading through crisis management, it's actually very, very important to not get sidetracked, that you need to look ahead and to just focus on what is the next important thing. There's a rule of three in crisis management. People will tend to remember what you say if you speak in threes. So, how to be factual, be clear, be sincere. It's okay to have emotion. If you don't know an answer, say that. If you are upset by something, emotionally upset, it is okay to show that. It's through that sense of humanity that we get connected. How could we communicate? Emails, webinars, and importantly, one-to-one conversations. So when we were organizing over the course of those initial days, again, we thought about in threes. 3 days of classes. We would survey from 3 groups, and we would formulate a new schedule for 3 weeks. And our message was consistent. When we spoke to our students, when we spoke to our faculty, when we spoke to anyone off campus, we love you, we miss you, we can't wait to see you. Here's one of our rules of 3 in action. You can see here the trial days when we matched our normal schedule. We used the 25th and 26th for calibration and some professional development, and then enacted a much healthier online schedule for the next 3 weeks. So we're in a nice pattern now. And unlike most crises, this COVID-19 crisis, we're unsure if we're at the beginning, the middle, or at the end. I will tell you, we've moved from leading to simply managing. And when you're managing a crisis, you can begin to think about other kinds of things. We moved from the physiological needs and safety needs, and then began extending our program to work on health, wellness, working on sleeping and eating habits, of working on our learning and our checking for understanding. We could now begin to think about how do we have deliveries on campus and how do we care for people here.
So, there are a lot of questions that we need answers to, and I need counsel and advice. For example, when should we open campus? How should we empty the 407 dorm rooms that are still fully occupied? What should we do if faculty and students can't go home this summer? How should we begin or start school for the 2020-2021 academic year? How should we approach graduation? I ask you to choose a question. Think about the stakeholders. Think about any potential obstacles you feel might come in your way, and devise a plan and send it to me. We'd love to hear on how you would address some of these issues. I started by talking about Ahmed, and I'll end with it as well. One of the great lessons I learned in Jordan was about only controlling the things that you actually can. Soon after he had passed away, I walked downstairs to the emergency room to see our other 2 students who had been in the accident. And there was the driver, employed by King's Academy, who had been driving the vehicle. One of Ahmed's relatives had come down into that area and met with the driver and one of his relatives. While I don't know what was said, it was clear by their body language what they were communicating. I suspect they asked for forgiveness, and Ahmed's family granted it, and it was finished. And it always stuck with me that something under the immense pain that they could find a sense of forgiveness, that they would only seek to control what they can and begin to move forward. This has been something that has influenced my life greatly. So while I never, ever thought my time at King's Academy would end this way, I will choose to learn from the traumas and be thankful. Thankful for my health, for my family, for my community, and for my school. I will seek to control the things I can, which is my attitude, my approach, and my eternal gratefulness. Thank you.